The biggest bargains in vintage stereo equipment are happening right now. Everywhere you look in the vintage stereo community, you are seeing people shouting from the rooftops, "The bubble is bursting, nothing is selling, get out now." Let's look at where you can score the silver gold. I'll give you my picks for a few models, a few brands you should be on the lookout for, and some red flags that if you see these, walk away. And later, I'll share a secret that those people shouting from the rooftops that the bubble's bursting don't seem to know. It's going to be a lot of fun. Let's get into it. And if you would have asked me this question 5 or 6 years ago, it would have been completely different. I would have said, check eBay, check Goodwill, check Facebook Marketplace. Because I do think back then, all three of those places, you could get lucky. You could score a deal. However, I do think there are some places that not everybody's looking. And that's the key to finding the really good deals. If it were me, rather than competing with all the other people sitting on their couch, scrolling through Facebook Marketplace and the Goodwill online store, I think you want to go hit the small mom and pop thrift stores that don't have a massive online auction site attached to them. And if you can get 20 minutes outside of your major city or wherever you live, I think the better your odds are. My wife and I used to spend our Sundays traveling a radius around Des Moines. She was hunting for Pyrex, I was hunting for vintage stereos. And what I consider almost to be a secret at this point, 10 years ago, I would have laughed at myself for saying Craigslist. I think Facebook Marketplace just destroyed Craigslist. And Craigslist at one point was the best way to sell something locally. And if it's been a while since you've been on Craigslist, you should definitely go. There's a little bit of a nostalgic trip there because it doesn't look like it's changed at all. It still looks like a kid in college in the early 2000s made it. And for a lot of reasons, I think Craigslist is a much better place to find local vintage stereo equipment than Facebook Marketplace. Half the time I'm on Facebook Marketplace, all I'm seeing are ads for Temu, Wayfair, other huge companies, and I'm not finding the stuff I'm looking for. And another secret place you might want to look is your local electronics recycling center. Go in there, introduce yourself, tell them that you're looking for vintage stereo equipment. You wouldn't believe what some people take to the recycling center not knowing it has value, or they just don't want to deal with it. We actually had a guy in Des Moines that sold a lot of gear out of our local recycling center's dumpster. He would go up there late at night on the weekends after people would drop off their electronics and cherry pick it. I did so much business with this guy. Eventually, I asked him, "How are you getting all this stuff?" And he told me. I at least bought 5 or 6 receivers. I got my acoustic research from him out of that dumpster. And unfortunately for him, the recycling center put a camera on the dumpster. They figured it out. They got savvy to it and is well dried up. And for those of you out there that want to take advantage of some of these deals, the bubble bursting, and while you might be able to score a good deal on a receiver, if it were me, I'd be taking advantage of the integrated amplifiers. Comparing the prices of an integrated amplifier compared to the receivers, as long as you avoid Pioneer, Sansui, and Marantz, you are getting a lot more power, maybe a lot more bells and whistles than you would be with the receiver. I think the Sonys are undervalued from the early 70s. The Kenwoods across their entire line is undervalued. And then a brand that we might not have even talked about on this channel is NAD. That might be the biggest bargain in vintage stereo equipment right now. And for those of you out there that have wondered why we haven't talked about NAD, I think we've only had 2 or 3 in the last 10 years. We don't see them very often here. And while they were definitely a popular brand in the 80s, at least in Des Moines, Iowa, we just don't see them. NAD definitely made some subdued looking equipment, and that might be a turnoff for some people. But if you're looking for something that sounds really good and has a decent amount of power on the cheap, if you can find a good working NAD integrated amplifier, you should definitely grab it. And a couple red flags you might run into that are deal breakers. Just walk away. 1, cut power cords. And if they say it worked the last time I used it, that's another one. Both of those are just excuses as to why they don't know if it works. And most likely, a lot of times, it's because they don't work. I mean, if you have a broken piece of stereo equipment, it's pretty easy to cut a little nick in the power cord and say, it's not safe to power up. It worked the last time I used it. I think you just need to put a power cord on it. That's a red flag. Another mistake we see people making when buying receivers and amplifiers, a lot of times they have the wrong knobs. Do yourself a favor and pull up a picture of when that item was new and just verify it's got the right knobs on it. A lot of these knobs look very similar, and if the seller knows that a knob is in demand, it's pretty easy to grab a knob that looks similar, stick it on the unit they're selling, and sell the in-demand knob on eBay. To me, vintage speakers are always going to be the place where you can get the best bang for your buck when putting a system together. They're big, they're hard to ship, nobody wants to ship them, so it forces them to be sold local. And for that reason, you're not really competing against the entire country, and you can pick them up cheap. There are a couple other benefits with buying vintage speakers. They're not complicated. There's not a lot to them. As long as the drivers are working, there's not a lot to go wrong. Compared to receivers, amplifiers, turntables, cassette decks, CD players, everything else, speakers have a fraction of the parts needed in order for them to work right. On top of that, the biggest repair you see with vintage speakers is usually foam rot. And this is absolutely not a hard project for almost anyone to tackle. I'm not affiliated with Simply Speaker, but they are definitely one of the best resources for sourcing refoam kits, and they've got an extensive video library on how to do it. Take a Sunday, few hours, refoam some speakers, you're going to get a great deal. Biggest thing to look out for with speakers is to definitely make sure the drivers are correct. We see so many speakers out there on Facebook and Craigslist. They have the wrong drivers. You know, they might have blown the tweeter or the mid-range, and rather than sourcing the correct one from the manufacturer, they bought some cheapies on Amazon or Radio Shack back in the day, and you're just taking a gamble as to whether or not they're going to sound okay. And I do think vintage turntables are an outlier here, where I do think the bubble burst on turntables maybe 5 years ago. I think the failure rate at this point has kind of gotten high. There's a lot of plastic parts, there's a lot of things to go wrong, and I think a lot of people went out and bought vintage turntables because they thought they looked cool and they got burnt. They took it to a repair shop or couldn't find a repair technician to work on their turntable, and they just bought a new one. So while speakers, amplifiers, and receivers have definitely gone up in value, the vintage turntables are just kind of sitting still. And if you have to have a vintage turntable, if it were me, I'd be looking for a Technics. I'd be looking for one of the direct drives. If you can find a manual, even better. But I think the key to buying a vintage turntable really comes down to a few red flags. You want to make sure the speed's accurate. And the best way to do this is to download a free turntable speed app. There are a ton of them out there. They might not be 100% accurate, but they're accurate enough. Accurate enough to let you know if there's going to be a problem with the speed. And that's a big problem. It's one of those things where you could get lucky. The speed controls might just need a little bit of deoxit, or it could be a circuit issue. And then that's a problem. It could also be that the grease and oil is dried up in the turntable. And depending on how complex that turntable is and what your skill level is, that's another reason to just walk away. And definitely think twice if the seller says anything like, it just needs a new needle, or it just needs a belt. Any of those just needs, that's a warning. If it just needs them, why didn't they do it? And then with everything else, cassette decks, CD players, reel-to-reels, electromechanical devices. Personally, I would just be buying them knowing that if they haven't been restored, then it's a gamble. If you can pick up a working cassette deck for $40 and you get a year or two out of it, you're probably doing good. Same with CD players. We've had several vintage CD players that didn't need anything. I've got a Pioneer sitting right over there, the old cartridge system. Never been serviced. It's been working for years. I just got lucky. And I think there's absolutely a lot of luck involved with cassette decks, CD players. Anything electromechanical, it's a crapshoot. I hate to say it. It just is. And I think the secret to all this, one of the things that the people that are claiming the bubble is bursting don't seem to realize is that this happens every single year. It's been this way for 10 years. And if you ask people that have owned stereo stores for the last 40 years, they'll tell you the same thing. Every summer, the interest drops. Everybody's outside, going to the beach, going on vacation. Stereo equipment, for the most part, as a hobby, is a seasonal hobby. From May all the way through October, business just drops. It's the way it is. I don't think it's going to change unless everybody stops going outside. And while that's probably happening to a certain degree, at least as of now, people are still going outside, including me. Once October hits, I'm drinking coffee, I'm sitting inside, I'm wanting to listen to records. It's freezing cold outside, and my stereo, my music, becomes my focus again. It's kind of like buying a lawnmower in the winter. That's when you want to buy the lawnmower. In the summer is when you want to buy your stereo equipment. I almost guarantee it in 4 or 5 months, people will be on the forums in the vintage community screaming about how prices are getting crazy again. It happens every year. And if you like this video, you should definitely watch this one. I almost guarantee it, most of those are still bargains.